I'm going to teach you a little bit about mode mixture. So we've all heard of the 7 church modes, as they call them. And what I've done here is I've arranged them in order from brightest to darkest, and I will demonstrate that right now. So the Lydian mode, it has a raised fourth and a major 7. Those are the variations on the in accordion. Like if you were comparing it to the Ionian mode, which is the major scale, that would be the major 7th is still in there, but I'll just show you what I mean. So here's the Lydian mode. So you got Fi Sol as opposed to Fa Sol, and now the next step down in brightness is the Ionian mode. So nursery rhyme-esque. And then you start getting into flattening notes. So the Mixolydian mode has a flat 7 in it. So you hear that in a lot of like rock and roll music. And now we're getting into lowering the 3rd with the Dorian mode. So it's minor, but it's got a little bit of cha-cha to it, you know? Yeah, and that effect is the natural 6 as opposed to the flat 6 in the Aeolian mode. So te will resolve down to la often in this mode. And the Aeolian mode, we flatten the 6. This is also known as natural minor in many contexts. You hear this a lot in like 90s grunge, I guess. Other sad music with guitars. And then to continue flattening notes and enter the darkness, we will play the Phrygian mode, which has a flat 2 now. So that Ra-Do relationship is really, it's a lot darker, you know, when compared to something like Lydian or something. You can hear the darkness within that spectrum of the modes. And then finally we have the Locrian mode, which we now flatten the 5 as well. So every scale degree is flattened except for 1 and 4. So. And this mode is the most unstable because it doesn't have a perfect 5th in it. This is your tonic chord. It's a scale built off of a diminished chord. So but with these modes you can mix them up any way you want. Let's say you want the bottom half of a Dorian scale and the top half of a Lydian scale. You could do that. So that's a unique scale if you're writing music or singing or like sounds that are different than other sounds, and you can use that one. And that's just one example. Another example is Lydian dominant. You guys know the Simpsons theme song? It's like, I don't actually know how to play it. Let's see. So that features Fi and Te. So I'll play that whole scale now. That's a Lydian dominant scale. So that's kind of borrowing from like Dorian Mixolydian with the Te-Do relationship, but also from Lydian with the Fi-Sol relationship, and it has a major 3rd. So that's technically not mode mixture. Those are mixed modes, which I've been told there's a difference. But yeah, so
I got a question.
Yes.
So what does the triangle next to the 3, does that mean it's natural or normal?
That's my own version of saying that it's major, because I didn't want to say sharp because that would be incorrect, because a sharp 3 is just a 4. So that's a major 7th symbol in a lot of jazz music, and you'll see that in lead sheets. So I use that to identify the difference between like a lowered scale degree versus a major scale degree. Because in a scale, your 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6, those are like just the primary, I don't know how to describe it, it's just like a phenomenon I try to articulate, but they're more of the default tones, and the 3s and 7s are what give the mode its color. So, yes.
Why is 6 not a color tone?
Well, I mean, I get you could argue that it is, but I just think as far as like scale quality, a 6 is like a 13, and it's just a more distant color tone. I mean, but it is, yeah. I mean, 1 can be a color tone, but that's just like my simplest way of trying to say that in 30 seconds. So what I've done is now I get into the actual mode mixture, which each mode has its own set of diatonic chords which are unique to that mode. So well, I'll just play a standard progression, and then I will mix up some of the chords by borrowing from another mode. So let's say I go major 1, 6, 4, 5, 1. Okay, so I'll alter that 6 now to a flat 6, major 7, borrowing from the Aeolian mode, and it'll sound different. So we went from to. So that's just one of the nearly infinite examples. You can basically pick any chord and create any progression of 1 through 7, and you can just choose the color that you want from this palette right here of diatonic chords in each of the modes. And that can go on forever, really. Like, let's see.
Does function matter? So like, can I just, like if I wanted a 2, like if I thought I was gonna have a 2, but I wanted to create a different sound, can I go to Phrygian flat 2? Would it just go where a 2 normally would, or would it go where a 4 normally would?
Well, what I encourage with this kind of thing is to try it out and see how you feel about it, because I mean, this isn't according to classical harmony, and this is really just a palette of sounds that I like to experiment with, and it's being a composer, this is a way that I often generate material, and I'm just kind of searching for sounds that I like to hear, really. But I guess to answer your question, function still exists. This isn't necessarily excluding or including that. This is just a set of options to build a progression or melody or whatever. Like I have a song called Wolf Doctor that has a minor 7 chord and then a variation on that chord, and then a minor 7 on the flat 3rd scale degree of that. So that's just an example of, I mean, I think that sounds pretty good, but probably according to many books that would be incorrect. But like I said, I just encourage expression and discovery within these boundaries. And yeah, I've listed some common examples down below. Flat 6, flat 7, like within the major key, if I have a 5, so that's 5, 7, 2, but I can now all of a sudden flatten the 7 and have a flat 7 chord, which we borrowed from the minor mode or from a couple other modes as well. And you can put 7th variations on these chords. The most common example of mode mixture in classical music, I would say, is just the dominant 7th in a minor key, because technically te is a member of the minor, the natural minor scale, but we substitute the dominant 7th from the major mode in that context, because that's minor 1, minor 5, minor 1, because technically minor 5 is diatonic in the minor mode, but we borrow that T from the major scale. And another one of my favorites is either 4 or 2 diminished, which flattens the 6. So you have a 1, and then a 4, and then a 1. But now, if you made that 4 minor, it would sound like this. technically, lay isn't in the key of a major mode, but you can use it if you want. And I guess this is more useful coming from a compositional standpoint or a analytical standpoint, but not so much performance unless you're trying to write music to perform. But I think it's just good general knowledge to have, because what I like to do is take various seventh. There's a dominant seven and then two major sevens within each key, right? So a lot of times I just like to put major sevens in different places, and it usually works, especially when they're a third apart because of chromatic median relationships. I'll show you what I mean. So this is an A flat sharp 11 chord, and now I'll go to an E flat sharp 11. Each of these scales on top of it, and I'm going between two separate scales. Yeah.
What were those chords?
It's a A flat, major 7, sharp 11, E flat, major 7, sharp 11. And you can throw in a 9 if you wanted.
So what key are you in?
I guess technically.
So why would you put a Roman numeral to that?
I would call it major 1, flat 6, major
Okay.
7.
So F flat.
Well, sure, yeah, F flat. Yeah, I guess I'm thinking more visually than theoretically, but yeah, you're correct in that. I'll counter that because I could. Depending on the context, I would call it either E or F flat.
Well, you said E flat earlier, so.
Did I say E flat?
Yeah.
Oh, that was not right. I apologize. So you'll hear this a lot in like Star Wars, like they just get to a new planet and then they're just going down in thirds or something, and then all of a sudden they zoom down on Tatooine or something. It's like a big John Williams thing, just borrowing thirds in various seventh variations, various variations.
So if I'm borrowing a flat 7, do I just get to pick whichever? If I'm like, all right, so this Sting piece I'm listening to has flat 7s everywhere, can I just say this is in Dorian, this is an Aeolian, or do I have to pick the one, or is it Mixolydian?
I think if it's shared within another mode, you could maybe get into an argument about like which functions more than the other with like another theorist, but at the end of the day, I mean, it has the sound that it has, and I don't know. If you were trying to analyze it, I think that's an interesting topic to bring up.